Okay, let me tell you about what happened to my friend Josie and her encounter with the Bloody Mary legend back when we were in college. This isn't my story, not directly, but it's a story she told me, a story that had a real impact on her and on how I think about things too. You might say it was her story, but I was the one who heard it, who saw the after effects, and who's telling it now. We were deep into the college routine, you know. Lectures, cafeteria food, late-night study sessions fueled by questionable coffee. The dorm was this old brick building with creaky floors and pipes that sang at odd hours. It had character, I guess you could say. And like any old building, it had its share of whispers and rumors, mostly harmless stuff. Ghost stories passed down from one class to the next. Bloody Mary was one of the big ones, a classic. Everyone knew the drill. Dark bathroom, mirror, say her name 3 times. We'd all heard variations since we were kids, usually accompanied by warnings from older siblings or terrified friends after a sleepover gone wrong. In college, it was more of a dare, a joke, something you brought up when you were bored, trying to freak each other out. One particularly dull evening, the topic came up again. We were sitting around in the common room, complaining about assignments and the dismal weather outside. Someone, I don't even remember who, half-jokingly suggested someone actually do the Bloody Mary thing. Most of us laughed it off, but Josie, like I mentioned before, got this look, a mix of curiosity and that little spark of wanting to push boundaries. "What if I did?" she said, her voice quiet but with a definite edge to it. We all turned to her. "Seriously, Josie, don't be an idiot," I remember saying. "It's just a stupid legend." "Yeah, but is it?" she challenged, not in a confrontational way, but like she was genuinely pondering it. "Has anyone here ever actually tried it? Like, for real, by the rules?" Silence. None of us had. We'd all heard about it, joked about it, maybe even stood in a bathroom with the lights off for a second before chickening out, but actually going through with the chant? No. "Exactly," Josie said. "Maybe there's something to it. Or maybe it's just a trick of the mind I want to see." We spent the next hour trying to dissuade her. We threw out every rational explanation we could think of. Optical illusions in the dark, the power of suggestion, just getting spooked because you expect something to happen. Josie listened, she nodded, but her resolve seemed to harden with each argument. She was determined to test the legend, to see if she could face the fear and come out unaffected. So, later that night, long after the common room had emptied out and the dorm was quiet, Josie headed to the bathroom. She told me about it the next day, recounting every detail with a kind of wide-eyed intensity that was unnerving. She said, walking down the hallway felt different in the dead of night. The familiar sounds of the old building seemed amplified, the shadows deeper. She got to the bathroom and flipped off the main lights. The only illumination came from the faint emergency lights and a sliver of light under the door from the hallway. It was dim, disorienting. She stood in front of the mirror, looking at her own reflection in the gloom. She said her reflection looked pale, almost ghostly in the poor light. Her heart was pounding. She could hear the blood rushing in her ears. Every instinct was telling her to just turn the lights back on and get out of there, but she pushed the feeling down. She told herself it was just nerves. She was here to prove it was fake. She took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper at first. Bloody Mary, looking at her reflection, searching for what? A change? A sign? Bloody Mary. Her voice was a little stronger now, but still strained. The darkness felt like it was pressing in on her. The bathroom felt colder than the hallway. Bloody Mary, the final chant. She stared intently at her reflection. Nothing. No ghostly figure appearing beside her, no blood dripping from the mirror. Just her own face, pale and scared, staring back. A wave of relief washed over her. See? Just a story. She even chuckled to herself. A short, nervous sound in the silence. She was about to reach for the light switch. But then, as she looked at her reflection one last time before turning away, she saw it. Or thought she saw it. Just a flicker, a subtle shift. Her reflection's eyes, for a fraction of a second, seemed to change, to narrow, to look colder. And the hint of a smile, a chilling, unpleasant smile, seemed to touch its lips before her reflection went back to normal. It was so fast, so fleeting that she couldn't be sure. Was it just the bad light? A trick of her tired eyes? The power of suggestion finally getting to her? She didn't wait to analyze it. That little flicker, real or imagined, was enough to send a jolt of pure fear through her. She fumbled for the light switch, her hand shaking, and flooded the bathroom with harsh fluorescent light. She didn't look in the mirror again. She just got out of there as fast as she could and practically ran back to her room. She expected the fear to subside when she was back in her own space, the lights on. But it didn't. It clung to her like a second skin. She got into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, but she couldn't close her eyes. Her room, normally a comforting space, suddenly felt alien. The familiar shadows seemed to deepen and writhe in the corners. The old pipes in the walls started their usual nighttime symphony of creaks and groans. But now, to Josie's terrified ears, they sounded like whispers. Low, sibilant sounds, just at the edge of intelligibility. Were they saying her name? Were they laughing? Her imagination, fueled by the encounter in the bathroom and the power of the legend, was running wild. She felt watched. The feeling was intense, like unseen eyes were fixed on her from somewhere in the room. She would quickly glance towards a dark corner, half expecting to see a shape, but there was never anything there, just shadows. Shadows that seemed a little too deep, a little too still. She tried to rationalize it. It's just the dorm settling. It's just the wind. It's just your mind playing tricks because you scared yourself. But the logic was a thin shield against the tide of fear. The more she tried to tell herself it wasn't real, the more real it felt. She spent what felt like an eternity lying there, rigid with fear, listening to the sounds of the dorm, interpreting every one through the lens of the Bloody Mary legend. A door closing down the hall sounded like heavy footsteps approaching her room. A sudden silence outside her window felt ominous, like something was waiting. Eventually, she couldn't stand the darkness anymore. She threw off the covers, her hands shaking, and turned on every light in her room, the desk lamp, the bedside lamp, even the small string of fairy lights she had decorating her wall. The sudden brightness was jarring, but it pushed back the most menacing of the shadows. Still, the feeling of being watched persisted. She got out of bed and paced her small room, unable to sit still. She kept glancing at the mirror on her closet door, avoiding looking directly into it, but still aware of her reflection in her peripheral vision. She swore she saw it shift sometimes, a quick movement that wasn't quite right. She thought about going to the communal bathroom again, just to see if the lights were on, if it looked normal in the light of day, which felt like an eternity away. But she couldn't bring herself to go back down the hall, into the darkness, towards that mirror. So she stayed in her room, lights blazing, a prisoner of her own fear and an overactive imagination. Every creak of the building, every distant sound, every shadow seemed to confirm that something was out there or in here with her. She saw a reflection in the dark glass of her window, and for a second her stomach dropped, thinking she saw a face looking back. Then she realized it was just her own reflection, distorted by the glass and the darkness outside. She didn't sleep at all that night, not a wink. She just waited for morning, for the sun to come up and hopefully banish the terrors of the dark. When I saw her the next day, I was shocked. She looked absolutely exhausted, her eyes sunken, her face pale. She told me everything, pouring out the story of the bathroom and the long, terrifying night that followed. As she talked, and as the bright morning light streamed through her window, some of the sheer terror seemed to recede. She started to see the things she'd experienced not as proof of a supernatural haunting, but as her own mind working against her. The flickering reflection in the bathroom. Probably just her eyes adjusting to the dark and the poor lighting, combined with the expectation that something should happen. The whispers? Just the old dorm sounds, interpreted through a filter of fear. The feeling of being watched? Pure paranoia, born from the suggestion of the legend. She admitted that nothing truly supernatural had occurred. She hadn't seen a full apparition, hadn't been physically harmed. The terror was real, but it had originated from within. Her imagination, amplified by the creepy setting and the power of the urban legend, had created a nightmare that was just as terrifying as any ghost. Josie was okay, of course. She recovered from her sleepless night. But the experience stuck with her. She's still fascinated by urban legends, but now there's a healthy dose of respect for how deeply they can tap into our fears. And she's definitely more cautious about late-night trips to dark bathrooms with mirrors. Her night of terror wasn't caused by Bloody Mary the ghost, but by the chilling power of her own mind, proving that sometimes the scariest things are the ones we conjure ourselves.